Novak Djokovic has amassed a massive number of titles over the course of his career. Being one of the greatest players ever, you'll have years where you dominate the rest of the tour, and you best believe Djokovic has had quite a few. His first year of dominance came in 2011 when he was unbeatable. But even the best at their very best can suffer embarrassing losses. Let's recap some funny moments involving tennis players on the court, starting with Djokovic's embarrassing loss. For someone who dominated the 2010s and continues to dominate the current decade as well, Novak Djokovic has also suffered his fair share of defeats. Most of them came in the 2000s when the Serbian was still finding his place on the tour, and given Federer and Nadal running the show, Djokovic struggled quite a bit. But for him, one of the most embarrassing losses of his career came in 2011. It happened in the ATP Finals, which should go a long way in telling you just how good Djokovic was that year, considering his embarrassing loss came against a top 10 ranked player. Taking on David Ferrer in the second round-robin match, the Serb champion had already suffered a scare against Tomas Berdych, fending a match point before sneaking a win. But his luck ran out when he came up against the Spaniard, who had a lot to offer on the day. For Djokovic, though, this is one of the most embarrassing losses of his career, and the statistics offer something of an insight too. After all, the match was over in just over 70 minutes. But even more importantly, Djokovic only won 4 games throughout the game. Ferrer basically produced a masterclass, and with Novak struggling, he went all out to get a famous win, one he'll always fondly look back on because it was an all-around brilliant show. He won 6-3, 6-1, and Djokovic would get knocked out after losing his third match to Janko Tipsarevic as well. Adding to that, the context behind the embarrassing loss. Well, losing to David Ferrer shouldn't be, generally speaking, embarrassing for any player. He may not have won a major title in his career, but he was a former number 3 on tour. So what makes this loss so embarrassing? Especially considering the fact that Djokovic would lose another game in the group stages and get knocked out by fellow Serb star Tipsarevic. Well, it was basically the fact that Djokovic was expecting the game to go exactly the other way. When you've had a season as Novak had in 2011 and he won 5 Masters titles and 3 major titles, you expect to win every match you play. After all, he began the campaign with 41 consecutive wins. This loss to Ferrer was one of only 6 losses that the superstar would face throughout the year, winning 70 matches. So it's understandable why he considers it an embarrassment, especially because it was a horror show from the Serb. It's a loss that certainly doesn't belong in the jigsaw of 2011. How can you have such a dominant year and go on to lose an important match without even troubling your opponent? Well, tennis is a funny game and you never know what to expect. Ferrer came out of the blocks early and dominated from the get-go. But let's take a detailed look into what went wrong for Djokovic on that night in London. Moving on, what went wrong for Djokovic? Known as one of the greatest returners, if not the single greatest of all time, Djokovic completely struggled to break down Ferrer's serve. Now, it's understandable if you can't do it against one of the bigger servers, but David Ferrer was certainly not known for his service games. However, he did play magnificently on the night, and Djokovic really had no answers to the domination. In fact, he only managed to force one breakpoint opportunity, which he couldn't convert, with Ferrer comfortably seeing it out. As a whole, he only lost a total of 11 points on his service games, which for someone like Djokovic is definitely embarrassing. It was also a painful watch if you're a Djokovic fan. The star simply couldn't display the quality which he'd done so easily throughout the season, and maybe the end of the season fatigue was starting to kick in. That's because he was also very poor on his own serve. If you drop your serve 2 times at the highest level, you are more or less done in the match, and if you're dropping it 4 times and being that poor on the return, then it's really game over, like it was for Djokovic immediately within 70-odd minutes. Not to mention, Djokovic also had like 30 unforced errors, most of which was basically a result of frustration, but also the cause of his embarrassment, because Djokovic likes a longer game, and if the rallies are over mostly in 4 shots or less, he's not having a great day, that's for sure. Also, the reaction from Novak. Unsurprisingly, Djokovic revealed that it was his worst match of the season and explained how it's a fact that he made too many unforced errors and wasn't playing well. The then world number 1 went on to elaborate how Ferrer was simply on top of his game, and for Djokovic, it's important to accept that he lost the match. He also said that Ferrer deserved to win because he himself couldn't offer any resistance to the Spaniard's form, and that the number of unforced errors he had made was embarrassing, and he didn't want to look at the stats. But he also gave a couple of contending theories as to why he struggled so much. One theory was the extended season he'd played, and how maybe the fatigue had kicked in at this point. The other was that he wasn't feeling well on the court, and that's a fair point too, considering Djokovic had missed 2 tournaments prior to the ATP Finals. Now, let's take a look at times when stars had funny moments on the court. For this part of the video, we'll take a look at some of the funniest moments involving the biggest names in tennis on the court. First up, Nadal's Steffi Graf moment. Rafael Nadal likes to have things under control when he's on the court, much like any other tennis player actually. However, Rafa is a little extra conscious about things, and that includes his bottle-related shenanigans, which have become very famous on the tour. So breaking Nadal's focus takes a lot of work, especially if you're not playing against him or you don't knock over his bottles. One such lady, though, was lucky enough to break Nadal's resolve at the Australian Open, and while she only got him to smile and raise his hand, it's still a magnificent achievement. You remember Steffi Graf's "Will you marry me" moment, right? It's just like that, but the reply wasn't as funny as Graf's "How much money do you have?" Rafa was steamrolling one of his many poor opponents at the Australian Open when someone from the crowd yelled, "Nadal, will you marry me?" The commentators immediately picked up on the call and laughed. For a second there, you almost think that Rafa will ignore it, but he lets out a smile because he can't keep it in. Hilarious. Up next, Djokovic's lapse of concentration. Well, you need a lot of concentration to win 21 Grand Slams, and we can't really fault Djokovic for having many concentration lapses over the course of his career, but one of them made for a hilarious moment at the Roland Garros. Playing against Muller, Djokovic was comfortably cruising toward a victory, winning the first set 6-1 and following it up with a 6-4 in the second. Leading the third by 4-1, Djokovic was trailing 15-30 on his serve. Not a huge problem, right? But you wouldn't want to lose one of your advantages. He found the perfect serve down the tee, and Muller could only muster a return which was going out for sure. Djokovic, for good measure, followed the ball, and as he was watching it drop out, he accidentally made contact with the ball through his racket. As a result, he lost the point and could only look at the spectators in utter disbelief. They were laughing, so Djokovic also afforded himself a smile. Moving on, Federer forgot he'd won the match. Talk about being in the zone. Playing in Halle, Federer came up against Nishikori, and after an easier first set, he needed a lot more to stay level in the second. Nishikori's resolve took the game to the tiebreak in the second set, and Federer was serving with 2 match points. The perfect serve and volley sequence was followed by Nishikori's return hitting the net cord. Federer watched the ball fall into Nishikori's court and made his way back, fist-pumping gently to himself. Purely focused, he wants to win. Can we blame him? Well, yeah, mate, you've already won. Nishikori was already at the net when Federer reached the service spot and then realized that the crowd was cheering him because he'd won the match, not just the point. An embarrassed Federer made his way to the net and shook Nishikori's hand, right in the face. Happens to the best of us, doesn't it? After that, Kyrgios asks for help from the crowd. Nick Kyrgios is known for his outbursts on the court, but sometimes even he can afford to enjoy himself. Playing against Gambos in Washington, it seemed that the Australian was out of ideas. Before serving, he asked a lady in the crowd where he should serve. It's not on record as to what she said, but Kyrgios' serve was an ace, and as soon as he won the point, he ran back to her and hugged her. We can safely say that she got that right, didn't she? Ending with, Hasse reminds fans that his name is Robin, not Roger. Federer got a lot of support wherever he played throughout his career. On one occasion, playing against Robin Hasse, one of the Federer faithful fans let out a "Come on, Roger" just before Hasse set himself up to serve. The Dutch player stopped and immediately responded, "My name is Robin," in a funny attempt to mention how the spectator accidentally got his name wrong. We're sure that's exactly what happened, Robin. You were definitely the one with the support that night, not Federer. Wink wink. That's a wrap for this video. What do you think truly went wrong for Djokovic in the ATP Finals of 2011? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you at the next one.